The night was a merciless one, as the skies above seemed to rage with fury. Rain poured down in relentless sheets, drenching the cracked sidewalks and flooding the narrow alleys that wound through the forgotten part of the city. But the storm didn't care for the world beneath it. It was loud, unforgiving, and filled the night with a sense of despair. The wind howled, whipping through the abandoned buildings, shaking the few streetlights that managed to stay lit. Their weak, flickering glow cast dim, shaky halos of light barely cutting through the pressing darkness. It felt as if the very heart of the city had turned its back on this forgotten place. Everything smelled of damp earth, rusted metal, and the heavy stench of decay. Forgotten lives lingered here, their stories and histories faded into the background of a city that had no more space for them. The streets were silent, save for the occasional rumble of distant thunder and the sound of the rain against the pavement. In the farthest corner of the city, near a deserted train station, a figure lay still, abandoned and broken. It was a German shepherd, her fur matted with dirt, her body gaunt and frail. She was more a skeleton than a dog now, her ribs protruding sharply, visible beneath the thin layer of fur that had once been a proud, glossy coat. The dog named Princess by the world, though her nobility had long since vanished, was barely breathing. Each shallow inhale seemed to take more effort than the last, as if her very will to live was being drained with every second. She lay in a dark alley, the wet ground beneath her cold and unforgiving, a sharp contrast to the warmth and safety she had once known. She trembled, her body quivering uncontrollably, not just from the cold but from the deep scars that marred her soul. Her eyes, wide and full of terror, locked on the darkness around her. Those eyes, though full of pain and fear, still held a glimmer of something more, a flicker of life that refused to go out. The alley around her was still, the world completely unaware of her suffering. No one seemed to care about the abandoned dog lying in the shadows. She had been left to die, and it seemed that death would come soon. But Princess wasn't quite ready to surrender. Not yet. In the same forgotten part of the city, not far from the train station, another figure shuffled through the shadows. His name was Jack, and like Princess, he too was a forgotten soul. A homeless man, Jack had been living on the streets for years, the toll of time and the weight of his past visible in the wear of his clothes, the dirt on his face, and the emptiness in his eyes. Once Jack had been a soldier, a man who served his country with honor and bravery. But war had a price. It wasn't just the wounds on his body that had broken him. It was the scars within, the nightmares that haunted him every night. Jack had seen things, terrible things that no one should ever have to see. The images of the battlefield still haunted his dreams, and the ghosts of his past followed him wherever he went. The pain of losing comrades, of witnessing things that no human being should ever witness, was a burden he could not shake. He had returned from the war a broken man, a stranger to the world he had fought to protect. Now Jack wandered the streets with his few belongings in a worn-out cart. Each day was a struggle for survival, a scrap of food here, a kind word there. He had long stopped expecting anything more. The world had forgotten him, just like it had forgotten so many others. But Jack had learned to survive in the shadows, to exist without truly living. That night, as the storm raged around him, Jack had found shelter beneath a rusted overhang near the train station. The cold seeped into his bones, and the wind howled through the empty streets. He huddled closer to his cart, trying to make himself as small as possible, hoping for a moment of warmth. It was then, in the midst of the storm, that Jack heard a faint sound barely audible over the roar of the wind. A soft whimper. It was weak, full of pain, but unmistakable. Jack's heart skipped a beat and his senses sharpened. His hand tightened on the cart's handle as he slowly stood up, wincing at the stiffness in his joints. He followed the sound, moving through the dark alleyways, his worn shoes slapping against the wet pavement. When he found her, Princess, lying broken and alone in the shadows, something inside him shifted. She was barely more than a shadow of her former self, but he could see the glimmer of life in her eyes. Jack didn't hesitate. He had nothing left to offer, no wealth, no comfort, but he had a small bit of food, a half-eaten sandwich. He crouched beside her, his rough fingers trembling as he reached out with the sandwich in his hand. "Here," he whispered hoarsely, his voice raspy from the cold. "It's all I have, but it's yours." Princess didn't move at first. Her instincts told her to run, to retreat into the safety of the darkness, but something in Jack's eyes stopped her. There was no cruelty in his gaze, no judgment, only a deep weariness, a kind of pain that mirrored her own. Slowly, cautiously, she took the food from his hand, her golden eyes never leaving his. Jack watched her eat, a quiet sadness settling over him. He understood what it was like to be abandoned, to be forgotten. He had lived it. And in that moment, as the storm raged around them, Jack made a quiet promise to the dog. "You're not alone," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I'll take care of you." The days that followed were filled with small, tender moments between Jack and Princess. Jack, with his weary body and broken spirit, did what he could to care for her. He scavenged for food, finding bits of bread, scraps from the garbage, anything he could offer her. He even found an old piece of fabric, torn and weathered, and fashioned it into a makeshift dress for Princess. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do. The fabric wasn't perfect, but it was a symbol of his care, a sign that he wasn't going to let her suffer alone. Princess, though weak and traumatized, slowly began to heal. Her fur, once matted and dirty, began to shed the layers of neglect, revealing a coat that still had a glimmer of its former beauty. The wounds on her body, both physical and emotional, began to fade as Jack's kindness and care worked their magic. The bond between them grew stronger each day. She would follow him as he walked, her steps becoming more confident with every passing hour. Jack, in return, found that Princess's presence offered him something he hadn't known in years: peace. The constant noise in his mind, the pain that had been his constant companion, began to quiet when he was with her. He didn't talk to anyone else, he didn't trust anyone else, but he talked to her. He told her about the things that kept him up at night, the things he couldn't share with anyone else. He spoke of his time in the army, of the friends he had lost, of the things he had seen. He told her about the battles, both on the field and in his mind. And though Princess never spoke a word, she listened with an understanding that words could not convey. At night, when Jack lay down beneath the small scrap of blanket he had found, Princess would curl up next to him, her head resting on his chest. It was a small comfort, but it was enough. For the first time in years, Jack found that he wasn't alone. As the days turned into weeks, the city around Jack and Princess began to shift. The relentless storm had passed, and the sun started to shine more frequently, warming the streets that had been so cold and indifferent. The world around them began to feel a little less harsh, though Jack and Princess knew better than most that change was often slow, and that hope was not always easy to find. They had become a familiar sight in the area: Jack, with his cart and disheveled clothes, and Princess, her once tattered coat now thickening into a healthier, glossier fur. Each day, Jack would sit on the same corner near the train station. It was the perfect spot for him to rest, and it allowed Princess to watch the world go by, her golden eyes scanning the crowd. The people passing by didn't notice her at first. They were too busy with their lives, too caught up in their own worlds to see the quiet bond between a homeless man and his dog. But little by little, something began to change. It started with the soft smiles from the occasional passerby, the curious stares from people who wondered about the man and the dog that seemed inseparable, living quietly in the shadows. At first, it was the simple things: a kind woman dressed in warm clothes would stop by and offer Jack a hot cup of coffee, a gesture of small kindness. She'd smile at Princess, her eyes full of warmth. "You both look like you could use this," she'd say, handing Jack the cup before walking away. It wasn't much, but it meant the world to him. Then there was the old man who owned a small shop nearby. He had seen Jack and Princess every day for weeks. At first, he had watched them warily, not sure what to make of the pair. But as time passed, he saw something different, something that pulled at his heart. One afternoon, as Jack sat with Princess curled at his feet, the old man appeared at his side, holding out a loaf of bread and some cheese. "It's not much," he said softly, "but it's fresh. Thought you could use it." Jack was stunned. At first, his rough fingers trembling as he took the bread and cheese. The act of kindness felt almost foreign to him now. He hadn't asked for help, hadn't expected it, but here it was, someone caring for him, for Princess. He smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thank you," he whispered. As the weeks continued, the quiet gestures of kindness grew. A young woman with a baby stroller would stop by every so often, dropping off a few cans of soup or a blanket she no longer needed. An artist, seeing the bond between Jack and Princess, would sketch them from across the street, leaving the drawings by their side with a note that simply said, "For you." Soon people started to talk. They'd point out Jack and Princess to others, telling their friends about the man and his dog who had somehow become a symbol of something more, something better. They had become a living testament to resilience, to the quiet power of kindness and companionship. People began to stop and talk to Jack, asking him about his story, asking how he and Princess had come to be so inseparable. For Jack, it was a bittersweet experience. He wasn't used to being seen, to being part of a community again. The world had turned its back on him so many years ago that it felt strange to be included, even in small ways. But with each kind gesture, with every passing smile, Jack found himself opening up more. Princess, his steady companion, was his anchor, and now there was a growing sense of peace in his heart. Just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city's lights flickered to life, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, and it started as a tightness in his chest, a slight discomfort that he tried to ignore. But as the seconds ticked by, it grew worse. His breathing became shallow and his vision blurred. His body, already worn down by years of neglect and the trauma of war, could no longer hold up. Jack collapsed onto the cold pavement, his hands clutching at his chest as the world around him spun. Princess, who had been lying quietly at his feet, immediately noticed the change in Jack's condition. She leapt to her feet, her eyes wide with panic as she watched Jack struggle. She barked, her voice frantic and full of distress, but there was no one nearby to help. The street was eerily quiet, the usual bustle of the city far away. She looked at Jack, then looked around, unable to understand why no one was coming to his aid. But Princess wasn't ready to give up, not now, not when she had been the one to save him so many times before. She didn't know what else to do, but she knew one thing: Jack needed help. With determination, she sprinted toward the nearest person she could find, a woman walking her dog along the sidewalk. Princess barked louder, her tail wagging frantically. As she nudged the woman's leg with her nose, the woman stopped, confused at first, but then she saw Jack lying motionless on the pavement. The terror in Princess's eyes was enough to spur her into action. She dropped her leash and rushed to Jack's side, calling for help. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, and Jack was quickly stabilized, his heart racing as the doctors worked to save him. Princess stood by, her body trembling as she watched the people work on Jack. She had done her part, and now it was up to the others to take over. The paramedics carefully lifted Jack onto a stretcher, and the woman patted Princess gently, speaking soothing words. "You did good, girl, he'll be okay." As they rushed Jack to the hospital, Princess followed close behind, not leaving his side. She had saved him just as he had saved her. And in that moment, there was no question about their bond. It wasn't just a connection, it was a lifeline. A bond formed from the deepest places of pain and love, one that neither of them would ever let go of. Word of Jack's medical emergency and of the heroic dog that had saved him spread through the community like wildfire. People who had watched Jack and Princess from afar now felt a deeper connection to them. The story of the homeless veteran and the abandoned dog had touched hearts in a way they couldn't ignore. And so, when Jack woke up in the hospital, disoriented and weak, the world he had once known was different. He was no longer invisible. Soon, the hospital staff informed him that a family had reached out to him. They had heard his story, had seen the bond between him and Princess, and they wanted to offer him a new chance, a home, a place to heal. The family was kind, their hearts full of empathy. They didn't see Jack as just a homeless man, but as someone who deserved a second chance. They didn't see Princess as just a stray dog, but as a symbol of hope. When Jack and Princess moved into their new home, it was a life-altering moment. For the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of stability. He had a roof over his head, food on the table, and the comforting presence of Princess by his side. The family treated both of them with love and respect, offering Jack the space he needed to recover, physically and emotionally. Jack's life had been a constant battle. The streets, the war, and the years of isolation had taken everything from him, his sense of self, his dignity, his peace. But now, in this new chapter, Jack was slowly rediscovering what it meant to live, not just exist. Each day in the home offered him something that had been so foreign for so long: comfort. He had a warm bed, a steady meal, and most importantly, he had Princess by his side. Princess too was flourishing. Her once scarred body, both inside and out, was healing, and she now carried herself with a quiet confidence. Her fur had grown back thick and shiny, and the spark in her eyes was undeniable. She had gone from a broken, starving stray to a beloved companion. Her story, too, was one of survival and resilience. Every day she watched Jack's transformation with unwavering loyalty. She could sense the change in him, just as he could sense the change in her. The family that had welcomed them with open arms treated Princess like part of the family. She no longer slept in the cold streets or wandered hungry through alleys. She had a warm spot by the fireplace and was always surrounded by love. And Jack, who had never thought he'd deserve such a life, was learning to embrace it. Despite the comfort, Jack still struggled. His PTSD didn't simply disappear because of a roof over his head. There were nights when the memories of war came flooding back, and the nightmares that haunted him for so long returned. But now, there was something different. Princess was there to comfort him, her presence a balm for his soul. He would often wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, only to find Princess lying beside him, her head gently resting on his chest. She never needed to say anything. Her silent comfort was enough. Each time Jack fought through those difficult moments, Princess was there, her calm and steady presence reminding him that he was no longer alone. She had saved him in so many ways, not just physically but emotionally too. As weeks passed in their new home, Jack began to see a future he hadn't allowed himself to believe in for years. He had a purpose now, not just for his own survival, but for Princess's. He began to feel a responsibility not only for his own well-being, but for the life he and Princess were building together. He started to volunteer in the community, helping at shelters, offering his time to those who had once been like him, lost and forgotten. The family that had taken him in supported his efforts, understanding his need to give back. They knew that helping others was part of Jack's healing process. He would tell them about the struggles of being homeless, about the dark times when he had felt that there was no way out. But now, every act of kindness he gave to others felt like a little. Victoria stepped further away from the pain that once consumed him. Princess, too, had become a symbol of hope. People in the community who had once ignored her now greeted her with smiles. The little dog who had once been discarded in an alley now had people stopping to pet her, to admire her transformation. Jack noticed the way people would look at her, and he realized that she was no longer just a stray dog. She was a symbol of resilience and survival, of the power of love and care to heal even the most broken. Together, Jack and Princess were a reminder that it was possible to heal from pain, to rebuild from ruin. Their bond had not only saved them, but had inspired others to believe in the possibility of recovery, of finding hope even in the darkest times. As Jack continued his volunteer work and Princess remained by his side, their story spread. It wasn't just their transformation that people admired, it was the bond they shared, the unspoken connection that spoke louder than words. The community began to rally around Jack and Princess. People who had never known the struggle of homelessness started to take action, donating to local shelters, offering food to the homeless and volunteering their time. The ripple effect of Jack and Princess's bond was undeniable. What started as a quiet act of kindness, one homeless man feeding a starving dog, had turned into a movement. more people reached out to Jack, offering him resources for mental health, support, job training, and more. And while Jack knew he had a long road ahead of him, he also knew he was no longer walking it alone. Princess's transformation from a broken stray into a beloved companion symbolized hope to so many. It wasn't just about the dogs. She was a representation of the possibility of healing. Her courage to trust again, to love again, became a beacon for others to follow. Months went by, and Jack's life continued to improve. The scars from his past never fully faded, but with Princess by his side, they became less of a weight. His memories no longer defined him. They no longer controlled his every move. Princess had taught him how to live again, how to find meaning in the smallest acts of kindness. One evening, as the sun set and the cool breeze whispered through the trees outside their home, Jack sat on the porch, Princess resting her head on his lap. He looked at her, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. This was home. Not just the house or the family who had taken them in, but the life they had built together. He gently scratched behind Princess's ears, his heart full of gratitude. "You saved me, didn't you, girl?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Princess's eyes, full of understanding, met his, and in that moment words weren't needed. She had saved him not just with her actions, but with her love. As Jack watched the world around him, he knew that the past could no longer hold him hostage. He had found his way back from the darkness, and in the process, he had found Princess, a companion who had made the journey worthwhile. Together they had healed each other. Together they had found a new beginning. And so Jack and Princess's story wasn't just one of survival, it was a story of redemption, of the power of compassion, and of the unbreakable bond that can form between two lost souls who, against all odds, find each other in the storm. Thank you for joining Jack and Princess on their journey of resilience and healing. Their story is a reminder that love and compassion have the power to change lives. If you were moved by their bond, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to share this story with your friends and family to inspire others. Comment below with your reflections, and make sure to subscribe for more heartwarming stories of hope and transformation. Together, we can make the world a kinder place, one story at a time.